I'm very glad that you're all here to attend this session. And as Idika was saying, and thank you for the warm introduction, I really hope that you feel welcome in the Proximus premises, and I'm very happy that we could host this event. Indeed, I have a couple of slides around how at Proximus we're really making sure that we're developing as much as possible a growth mindset to transform our sales teams. And that growth mindset is actually enabled through the fact that we've decided to implement Agile at scale within Proximus, including in our B2B sales. So I'll walk you through all of that, and I hope that at the end of the session, you will feel compelled and enthused to ask questions. Maybe a little bit about me before we start. I'm one of those corporate dinosaurs that we were talking about in the previous session. So I am 20 years now in B2B, 20 years in telco, and 20 years in IT, because I worked for companies such as Orange and Microsoft, and now I'm here at Proximus. I've been here for 2.5 years at Proximus, and as you can probably hear, unfortunately, I have to admit that I'm not Belgian. I have been living here for 12 years, so thank you very much for your warm welcome. And I'm half French, half Dutch, which hopefully puts me in a neutral position. So that's about me. So let me walk you through maybe a bit more about Proximus. I think you've probably all got in mind a few ideas or a few preconceptions about who Proximus are. I think the first thing that I wanted to highlight to you is what is Proximus's sense of purpose? Or what do we want to make sure that not only our customers, but our partners and mostly our employees have meaning when they think about what they do within Proximus? So our sense of purpose is the one that you see here, which is boldly building a connected world that people trust so society blooms, and we actually also have an ambition. And our ambition is to become the European reference telco. Why? Because I think there's so many things that we're doing in Belgium that can actually then be used as reference for the other European countries. A little bit more about Proximus, so you know a little bit also about how we measure up in terms of facts and figures. We have two, and that's not very well known actually, we have two arms to the business. One which is the domestic arm and which is an international arm. Today, 75% of our revenues, 4.4 billion euros, is generated domestically by two divisions. One, the residential division, who has brands such as Mobile Vikings, Scarlet, and Proximus. And the other one, which is the enterprise, telco, and ICT, which I'm responsible for. So basically, my teams are responsible for all of the B2B customers from 1 employee upwards, so from the baker to Belfus, more or less. But we also have an international division, and that international division is already 25% of our revenues and will continue on growing. And it's in areas where you would not expect us perhaps to be, such as Telesign, which does digital identity. Now, we're actually going to be talking about what our B2B business does. So it's also not as well known, but in B2B, we cater for telco, but we also have an IT business. And already today, our IT business represents more than 30% of our revenue. And tomorrow it's expected to grow even more. This is a quick extract of our 3-year plan where you see the growth curves of the IT, which is the light pink, and the telco, which is the purple. It means also that from a sales perspective, we are transforming our sales teams from actually selling transactional business, SIM cards, and maybe a few more added valued services, to actually being able to sell cloud, to be able to sell cybersecurity, to be able to sell advanced workplace, and all of the professional and managed services that go with that. And I can tell you that if you're not used to selling IT and you come from the telco world, it's really, really not that obvious. And it's particularly relevant because if you look at my industry or the industry that Proximus is in, you know, and we are all aware that the telco and the IT frontiers are blurring. Everything in telco is becoming softwareized, disaggregated and API-based. So the transformation towards making sure that we are able to sell IT and technology is even more relevant than it was yesterday. To give you a bit more insights, because the B2B entity within Proximus is actually quite specific, I take care of about 2 billion euros, give or take. We are a family of 8 affiliates. Within those affiliates, we have specializations in cybersecurity, like Da Vinci Labs. But we also have Spear IT, for example, which is an affiliate that is the IT reference partner for the mid-market. We also cover Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. So we're very much a Benelux player. And we serve, in Belgium only, 490,000 customers. And to do all of this, to generate this revenue and make sure that we keep those customers happy, we have nearly 3,000 employees. I mentioned what was our sense of purpose. And the reason why I'm putting this on this slide is you'll see that the transformation that we're going through actually makes us able to execute this sense of purpose in a bold manner. Bold 2025 is the actual name that we've given to our 3-year strategic plan, which we kicked off in January of this year, and that will take us towards 2025. And this plan is a growth plan, but it's also an operational plan, and it's an ambitious plan, hence the word bold. When I said it's an operational plan, I meant it. Why? Because at the end of the day, what you will see on this slide is that we've actually got operational levers to enable us to put that plan into action. And if you look at those levers, there's one very, very important strength or one very important enabler, which I'm going to focus on during this presentation. And that enabler is this one. Fostering the culture within Proximus that enables us to realize our transformation and that enables us and every employee to know exactly not only what they're responsible for individually, but also what they should be doing collectively. What we've also decided, and quite a bold move, was to actually say that we were going to, as I said in my introduction, implement Agile at scale within Proximus. And not just for the B2B division, but for the entire Proximus group. And we decided to do that for 3 reasons. First of all, we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on customer value, making sure that every activity that was done by a Proximus employee would enable somehow a positive customer experience. We also wanted to, as we said, slice the elephant. What do we mean by that? We wanted to make sure that we were ready to actually look at all of the different things that we needed to do in order, make sure as well that we took them into small chunks in such a way that if we were failing, we would actually realize quite quickly that we were failing and we would be able to pivot, learn from it, and move on. Last but not least, and as a big organization as Proximus, we also needed our employees to feel that they were empowered at their levels to make the right decisions. Make the right decisions for the company, and also, of course, make the right decision for their customers. And that also included sales. But as you can imagine, for a company of the size of Proximus, there's no one-size-fits-all. There's different flavors of Agile. There's the Agile tribes, which is, the Spotify model, for example, where you create squads with multidisciplinary teams. There's Agile circles, which fits more the operational side of the team. So, for example, all of the people that actually deliver the offers that we sell. And then there's something called Agile for Teams, which are for all of the teams that aren't part of the Agile model, but we have the same vocabulary, the same working principles, the same framework, etc., and rhythm of business so that everybody can understand each other. I was asked what I wanted to do from a B2B perspective, knowing the sales transformation that we have to go through, moving from being a telco provider to an ICT, IT and telco provider. And I spoke to quite a lot of companies inside Europe, inside Belgium, who also moved to Agile, because I think it's best sometimes to learn from others' experiences. And I basically also made sure that I spoke to other telco companies like TDC in Denmark, who actually implemented Agile also for their B2B activity. But their B2B activity was a lot smaller than ours. And I decided, with the rest, by the way, of the enterprise leadership squad, that because of the sheer scale of the transformation that we wanted to do and the empowerment and accountability that we wanted to give our sales team and the growth mindset that we wanted to develop, we decided to adopt for the Agile tribe model, the Spotify model revu à la Proximus. What did that entail? That entailed the fact that we decided to roll out one sales model, Agile for all. 230 employees were involved and are now in the Agile tribes in a squad mode. We also made sure that our customers were supported with those Agile circles operationally that I mentioned. We now support our 490,000 customers in an Agile way. And we also invested in Agile support profiles, Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, etc. We also did this because a lot of our customers were implementing Agile themselves, either in their IT organizations or in their product delivery. And we felt that being able to also implement Agile meant that we could also much better link up in our Agile models between each other. Agile also means that you have two sort of pillars that work hand in hand. You have on the one hand the tribes, and you have on the other hand the chapter areas. If you want to think about what it means in a sort of old traditional way of thinking, the tribes are your functional teams. And your chapter areas are your organization structures. So your dotted line versus your fixed line. The tribes have a very clear operational accountability to drive business results. They're performance-driven, they're measured on their performance, and also they have the resources that they need to get the results. The chapter side, as I was saying, is much more on the organization structure side, and there they set the principles. They look at the guidelines that need to be implemented. They also look at what type of resources needed today, but also tomorrow in terms of skills, in terms of expertise, in terms of certification. Once we've done that, we thought about what does the Agile model help at transforming our sales talents. We wanted to move from a reactive sales who has a deep expertise and deep knowledge of our core telco business and potentially also some hierarchical reflexes to someone that would be proactive, very much a technology expert and an empowered individual. One thing that we were very keen on doing with the rest of the enterprise leadership squad was to actually stop the culture of escalation. Something's not going well, you have to go all the way up the chain, then whoever is up the chain, could be me, takes a decision without necessarily knowing all of the context and because it's diluted and then it goes all the way back down. One, it means I'm not necessarily the right person to take the decision because I don't have the knowledge. Two, it takes a long time. And three, I don't think it's good either for myself, the person that thinks he or she needs to escalate, or the customer at the end of the day. And that we wanted to stop. If I look at the ideal salesperson, that person needs to be the trusted advisor of the customer. He or she needs to have an in-depth understanding of the industry and of the vertical, the industry of its customer. He or she needs to be also able to understand how technology translates into enabling better efficiency for this customer, but also potentially think about new business models. A good salesperson also needs to be pragmatic. Pragmatic into thinking, okay, what should I tackle next? How shall I be able to overcome the next hurdle? How am I going to make sure that I have this opportunity approved? And at the end of the day, also with the growth mindset to always keep on thinking about what are the technology evolutions that are coming to market. Am I sure that I have the right expertise for tomorrow? And as you can see on this slide, the reason why we're transforming our sales teams, you can see them on the left-hand side. It's about reinforcing our focus, and that we're able to really manage better the skills and competencies of today, but also those that we need tomorrow. That we're also able to develop the skills of our employees, that we're able to source better the skills that we want, and that Proximus is a very attractive place for sales to come to. That's my pitch, by the way, for any of you who are interested. Very good performance management. At the end of the day, it's also about being able to engage and collaborative in the right manner. This is what it looks like. So I have my PO, the gentleman with the little blue circle next to it. He is enabled by a Scrum Master and an Agile coach, and he has different sales account managers. But also in his multidisciplinary team, he would have pre-sales, he would have a solution sales, i.e. a specialist sales. Let's say, for example, it's in cloud or it could be in workspace. But also, what's interesting is there is the success manager. It means that the PO of that squad is not just responsible for driving the sales, but also driving the profitability of the customers that he has in his squad. So it's a very different type of skill set as well. In Proximus, we have 3 segments of customers. One segment, which is the top segment, which is the segment of 1, which, as you will see, has the biggest IT share, and where we cater for 18, I would say, biggest accounts. It could be the Vlaamse Overheid, it could be Satelliek, Astrid, or many others. And there, it's generally a fully customized, dedicated team. We then have our industries. Industries represent around 23,000 customers, either in verticals, such as finance, retail, or others, but also in geographies, areas, such as Wallonia or Flanders. And then we have the SMEs. The SMEs is 450K customers, and those go from 1 employee up to 200 employees. And those SME customers also want to have local interaction, and here we actually make sure that we also cater to them through our indirect partner channel. And in this last segment, you see that the IT business is not as high in terms of percentage as in the other segments, which is, of course, a growth opportunity for us. But as we all know, and as it was discussed in the panel sessions previously, our SMEs don't have a myriad of experts, whether in purchasing or whether in IT, to actually make the right decisions, so they have to be handled differently. Why do I mention that? I mention that because when we decided to implement Agile for our sales teams and for our 3 segments, we knew that it would not be one size fits all. We're talking about different customer sizes, we're talking about different customer complexity in terms of solutions, we're talking about also different ways of working. And so what we decided to do is we decided to actually make a more tailored approach for each of those segments. For the segment of 1, the squads are end-to-end agile multidisciplinary teams. Again, the PO is responsible for the sales of the customers, but also for the profitable delivery of what's been sold. In the industries, which you remember is this sort of vertical, but also geographic tranche of customers, it's very much ad hoc. Depending on the opportunity, you would have different sales specialists or pre-sales flying in, as we call them, to actually enable the squads and fly out when no longer necessary. And for SMEs, it was more of a solution and servicing agile model, which, as I was saying, is supported by our indirect partner channel to make sure that we have that local presence. Now, what does it all mean? If we look at our customer experience and the information that was given to us by our customers through NPS scores or through CES or simply through talking to them, we saw that our account manager, who is the lovely gentleman in the middle, who is talking to the customer with the crown, you would see that he would really struggle to actually make sure that he would have the leverage on the different teams that were necessary to make something happen for the customer. It was time-consuming processes. There wasn't real proactive transparency on the process or on the solution improvements. It was very difficult to do things first time right. And at the end of the day, there was also limited room for creating those long-term sustainable relationships that we've also been talking about in the previous sessions. And that is so critical and important when you're working with customers. So what happened? With Agile, what we've put in place are those multidisciplinary teams that support each other. There's transparency on the process. There's also reduced lead time for new opportunities or in case of customer questions. And last but not least, the account manager can spend a lot more time becoming this trusted advisory role that is really very aware of what's going on from a technology standpoint and able also to translate the customer insights that he has to fix them, but at the same time be the internal sponsor of that customer within the organization through this new way of working. I thought you might want to have a very specific example of what that could look like and how that enabled, for example, project delivery. The teams had been working on a very critical infrastructure project, which of course needed to be on time and on budget. Always difficult when you're doing a project of that size. And we thought, okay, well, let's have a look and do a bit of a retro as to what happened well and what happened maybe less well that we could course correct for the next time. And if you look at the different governance and frameworks that an Agile enables us to do, you will see that from a governance standpoint, it enabled the teams to have the project down into smaller pieces, user stories, and made visible in a tool that everybody used that's called Target Process. The 2-weekly sprint planning also made sure that everybody was on the ball delivering their piece, focusing on the delivery of the projects in those 2 weeks. A clear backlog of items, and last but not least, also a very good progress follow-up. So that's just one example that hopefully highlights to you how this Agile governance came to be and enabled the critical infrastructure project to be delivered on time. What's also important, and this is why we've been talking about growth mindset, is at the end of the day, what we need to make sure is that we're able to offer our sales team, whether account managers or pre-sales or solution sales, with the training and capabilities that they need. Because that creates also and sustains long-term this growth mindset that I was talking about. We're doing it in 2 ways. We first of all map the existing sales competency, and we set up an individual development plan so that we understand for each individual, these are the things, whether in soft skills or whether in technology expertise, you should be able to progress on. And we have dedicated e-learnings on specific topics to ensure there's continuous learning. But at the end of the day, it's also about having all-round sales profiles, so a more generic approach through portfolio knowledge, skills, pitching, and of course making sure that they are supported with the right tooling. You may ask me, how do you measure the success of your new Agile sales organization, Anne-Sophie? Quite easily, actually, but you have to bear in mind that we started this journey back in June of last year. And in every journey, there is a certain time that needs to be awarded and given to really understand whether or not we've been able to reap the successes that we were thinking of from the beginning. We have 3 key criteria, because of course, as a veteran sales leader, I could tell, well, if the teams do their order intake, if the customer P&L is progressing in the right direction, if we get the cash in, the revenues are flowing, then everything's going really well. But no, we wanted it to be a lot less granular and really think about the outcome that we wanted to generate. So we have 3 key measurement items. The Net Promoter Score, i.e. our customer satisfaction. whether or not our time to market has been reduced or not, and last but not least, do our employees actually feel more engaged? And we measure all of these things either yearly or bi-yearly through surveys, independent surveys. And the results so far are the following. As you can see, I'm being quite transparent as to where we are. So from an NPS perspective, our NPS has been progressing in all of the different segments, so that's promising. Our employee engagement has also been improving. Now, of course, it's also the time when you read all of the verbatims that come through those employee surveys of really understand, whether or not, the agile ways of working has actually yielded its fruits or not. So it's also always very interesting. And then last but not least, where we haven't been able to really measure the KPI on time to market is also because we haven't really had time to. So there we've put a sort of orange bolleke, as they say in Dutch, but hopefully that will turn green in time as well. As I was saying, we also have to be conscious that with every new model, there are potential pitfalls, and it's always very difficult between the design that's happening on paper, now on PowerPoint these days, and that's actually implemented in reality. There are always tweaks that needs to be looked at. And the tweaks that we're looking at doing from a design perspective are the following. We see, as I was mentioning earlier, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So there are elements in terms of our agile methodology that we might want to change. For example, are we making sure that we give, through this framework, enough time for our sales teams to be present at customers versus internally? We have what we call chapter homecoming days. And in those chapter homecoming days, all of the sales teams come back to the towers or to the regional offices where they are, and we provide them with training and the ability to exchange on best practices, learning experience, and so forth. How often should we have those? What should be on the agenda? All of that needs still to be tweaked. We still also have to optimize and scale the way of working. We're talking about a population that is essential to the core business of what Proximus does, and that is also always rated by our customers as being really the face of Proximus, our sales teams. So we need to make sure that we also optimize the way that they work. And last but not least, as I was saying, it's a journey. We started in June of last year, so it will soon be a year, but it was also a staggered implementation. So for example, I mentioned the segment of one. They actually started a bit later than others, so it was sort of more autumn time frame. And through a journey, there's always people that are very excited and ready to embrace the change, others that might not be as much. And it's also important to take those along with you. Because at the end of the day, as we talked about the growth mindset, it's about making sure that the growth mindset lives in everybody. And in order to do that, change management is only possible if there's a new culture that comes to play within the company. And this new culture, which we call Think Possible, sustains everything that I've just mentioned. We worked hard with the rest of the Proximus leadership squad as to what are the behaviors that we want to have instilled in the company so that we can make a real step change in terms of culture and everybody feels that they're actually able to live that Proximus culture. We defined 4 of them. You can read them on the slides. I care, I make a difference, I radically simplify, and I embrace the future. How did we get to those 4 components? I care was because coming out of Corona, a lot of our employees felt that there was a distance between what they called the Proximus towers and the rest of the organization. And we saw that it was very important to be able to actually show that we are all in it together and that we are one team and we are very close to each other. I make a difference is, of course, related to the empowerment and the accountability. I, as a Proximus employee, wherever I am, I can actually make a difference. If I have an idea and if I'm empowered to put that idea into play, I should. I radically simplify. I don't think I need to actually spend too much time on this, because if anybody has a preconceived idea of what Proximus stands for, it's complexity. So on this one, I think it's quite obvious. And last but not least, it's around embracing the future. Why? Because our market is evolving at such a constant, rapid speed that we need to be able to capture it very quickly and take the decisions so that we're always going to stay relevant. You will also tell me, Anne-Sophie, it's fine, you put these things on the slide and then it sort of lives for a few months and then it dies. The idea is that every time that we have a stand-up or a rolling wave planning, that the teams actually think about whether during that meeting they've been able to demonstrate and live themselves those 4 behaviors. So for example, and some of my team is here present, I always try to make sure that when we discuss a topic, and generally it's heated discussions, we always try to make sure that we do it caringly, that whoever is in the room and always feels that they make a difference, that when we think about that topic, we look at how it can simplify the organization, and last but not least, that we're also doing it with a long-term view in mind. I wanted to end my quick presentation talking about how we've basically been rolling out this culture that started in 2021, and that how this culture is, and those behaviors that I've just mentioned, are part of our day-to-day activity and sustain this growth mindset that I've just mentioned. It started in March 21. Peak was the code name for implementing Agile within Proximus, to what we call the strategy cascade. When I joined Proximus 2.5 years ago, I didn't know what any of those words meant. Strategy cascade is when we decided on our next 3-year plan, which is Bold 2025, and that we were going to explain to our teams what it stood for and cascade it towards them. So that's why it's called the strategy cascade. And now, since the beginning of January, we're rolling out all of the different elements and priorities of that plan. So hopefully, even though I'm a dinosaur in the corporate world, I've been able to show to you that we are happy to embrace modernity, really try to cultivate a growth mindset, and make sure that our sales teams not only feel empowered to work for their customers and be their best customer's voice, but also are happy working at Proximus. So thank you all very much, and I open it to questions.
Questions for Anne-Sophie?
Oh, hello.
Hello, Anne-Sophie. Michel Vos from Genesis.
Yes.
We know each other. We are business partners.
Yes.
Interesting presentation about transforming your sales force into an agile. I wonder, there's a lot of change for these people who are used to selling telco solutions, and now you want to have them sell solutions. Did you use any, let's say, compensation changes to motivate them more? Could you share a bit on that? Is that really required? Have commissions been changed? It's a thing I see often happening to motivate salespeople to sell something different. Yeah. So that's why I'm asking the question.
So I decided to stay away from that topic, but I will answer your question. So yes, is the answer. Yes, we've changed the compensation scheme so that indeed our sales teams are motivated to sell more IT than classical telco solutions. The reason why I stayed away from mentioning it is because I think it's one of the tweaks that you do, but it's not a radical transformation. And I mentioned to you that I spoke with TDC, the Denmark telco, and I asked them, I said, did you change exactly the question that you asked me? I said, did you change your compensation scheme to your sales when you implemented Agile? And they said to me, we killed it off. We decided that sales don't need to have a special compensation plan. They will be like the rest of the employees. They will no longer have a bonus. They will have their fixed salary, and that will be it. So I thought that was brave, that's bold. How is it working? And his answer became a bit waffly. So I thought to myself, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay in my very old traditional ways of thinking, which is that at the end of the day, sales, of course, is a very performing individual when he feels he has the room to grow, when he or she feels that they have the room to actually be their best customer's advocate, and also if they feel rewarded for the work that they're doing. So I've changed the compensation scheme with the rest of the team. We've seen its first results in 2022, and we'll see how it evolves in this year. So I'm being very transparent with my answer. Anyone else?
You mentioned that you went into the Agile transformation almost a year ago. In hindsight, is there anything, if you could restart, that you would do differently? Or if there would be an organization in the room that is thinking about Agile, is there one piece of crucial advice that you would give, that you would say, if someone had told me that upfront, I would have been very happy?
First of all, it's a lot of work. So, would we have done it differently? We spent a lot of time with the enterprise leadership squad, so the management team, thinking about how we wanted to implement Agile. And I'm glad that we did spend that time, because it helped us go through the design principles. What I had underestimated is the actual work to manage that change. Now, I've done transformation programs in the past in my previous companies. So I knew how critical change management was, but I didn't realize how critical this change would be for the teams, because it's such a different way of working, and also it changes the management strats. Let me explain. In Proximus, we had a lot of team leaders, and when a team leader becomes a PO, you work functionally. You no longer work hierarchically. And it means that you no longer have the hierarchical power that you once had. And for a lot of people, it's quite difficult. And I think I underestimated that myself personally. I underestimated how difficult that would be for some of our staff. And I think in hindsight, if I had done differently, I would have probably made sure that there was more change management around that particular aspect of the change. Any other questions?
Good afternoon, Anne-Sophie. My name is Alexander Marin. I work as a sales director at UiPath. I understood you're the Chief Enterprise Business Officer.
Yes.
And my question is, did Proximus, so also the other divisions, move to complete Agile? And if not so, or you have other entities within the Proximus group who are not using Agile, how is now the interaction with the other parts of the business who might be still in other way of working?
So indeed, so the residential business unit and myself, we both went Agile. We did the Agile tribe model. There was a slide where I presented 3 flavors of Agile. So the wholesale business, partly, the enterprise business and the consumer business, which are the 3 revenue generating entities, went Agile tribes, so full Agile. The delivery organization went for the Agile circles, which is a different way of putting pluridisciplinary teams together because it's implementation teams. And today, the rest of the organization is what we call Agile for Teams. And Agile for Teams means that they continue on working the way that they've worked before, but they have the same processes, the same vocabulary, and the same governance than the rest of the organization does. And to give you an example, staff and support, so finance, HR, sourcing are in that model. They're in the Agile for teams model and not the full Agile tribe model. The way that we've decided to do this is because we felt it was the most appropriate to deploy Agile at scale within Proximus. And I think it was the right decision. What we're looking at now is whether some of those Agile teams will move into Agile circles or Agile tribes, so the journey isn't finished. I think the reason why it works, to come to your question about how do you make everything work together, is because we've decided that there is a common methodology, there's a common framework, there's common vocabulary, and there's that think possible culture that embodies and supports and sustains all of the changes that we've made, so that we all think the same and that we all speak the same language and that we all work somehow in the same way. So I think that was a very, very important component in making sure that indeed all of the different flavors of Agile, whether full Agile, Agile tribe, Agile circles, and the Agile teams, which are the least Agile, not working in multidisciplinary teams, could still work and gel together.
Maybe a last question?
Was that a... No? Someone just sort of not raised his hand. No? Well, hopefully you liked the presentation. I'm around if you want to ask any more questions. And thank you very, very much for your attention and the questions that you had. Thank you all very much.
Thanks a lot, Anne-Sophie.